Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at the EG Cities live session after your lunch. So thank you for coming and digesting with us. So my name's Sam McCleary. I'm the editor at EG, and I'm really excited to bring you not just one panel session, but a little video treat as well. Ooh, video treat as well. We're going to start with the video. It's about 8 minutes long. My wonderful panel is going to sit here so you can stare at them while you are watching the video, which might be a bit awkward, but hey, that's what we're here for, isn't it? To have awkward conversations and stare at people. The video is beautiful. It's a lovely film around London and looking at the commercial opportunities there are in London and how we continue to make the most out of those while we are obviously facing some real pressures at the moment on build costs and development, but how we all are fighting for the right thing to build community and places and really seize those opportunities. So I have to operate the system, so hopefully this will work. Enjoy the film and then we'll get into the discussion afterwards.
We have a fantastic opportunity in the London development market. The tenant drive towards amenity and creating amazing spaces in new buildings and repositioned buildings, much more space for tenants to use on a community basis. Real opportunity for design development. Don't forget, London has led the way in building design through many decades. And we see this opportunity here as good as anywhere else.
We will continue to build. I think we need to.
It's a way to build tension, isn't it? Tension and excitement.
My colleague is saying she'll give a thumbs up if she can hear it volume.
Right, so
start it again.
So we need to start again to see if we can get this. So I'm going to advance it now.
Yep. Okay. Here we go. Oh. Here we go eventually. What have I done? There we go. And yes. And volume.
We're never going to be able to solve this if she keeps stopping the video, by the way.
Okay.
Because we need the sound to continue.
We'll give this. Yeah.
We have a fantastic opportunity in the London development market. The tenant drive towards amenity and creating amazing spaces in new buildings and repositioned buildings, much more space for tenants to use on a community basis. Real opportunity for design development. Don't forget, London has led the way in building design through many decades. And we see this opportunity here as good as anywhere else.
We will continue to build. I think we need to find new ways of building things, working with materials that are more affordable, for instance, or that are less prone to high inflation like steel. But despite the rising costs and high inflation, I remain very optimistic that we'll continue to build it as we do today. And in conditions like this, having the right basis is more important than ever before. And for us, the right basis here at Canada Water was we got the right location, we got the right team, and we also done a lot of deep thinking as to what we're trying to achieve as a product. We're really well connected at Canada Water. We're direct link to West End, the city, and Canary Wharf. But more importantly, we got some amazing infrastructure around us, which is about 30 acres of blue and about 100 acres of green within a kilometre radius from our site.
The development industry is reacting well to delivering new fantastic spaces with great amenity, great ESG credentials. That's partly because we have to, as a nation, to build better buildings with better building fabric, but also because tenants want that space. All the statistics are telling us that demand is focused on the best, grade A, and most sustainable space. In terms of pressure on construction and procurement, obviously construction cost inflation has been significant, and there's plenty more of that to come. The other issues, well publicised, delay of supply of materials, deliveries to site are a lot longer, and we've got issues around supply of labour. Some of those are correcting themselves, and that's working through the process. But more recently, we've got the issue around yield movement and changes in the investment market, and that has real impacts for pressure on both ends of the appraisal, on the value side and on the cost side. So for developers, on an appraisal perspective, their cost inflation has been significant. We reckon since 2018, a central London office building would be about 25% more expensive today than it was in 2018. For this pipeline in 2023, 21% of it hasn't started yet. And for 2024, 50% of it hasn't started yet. Normally, we would expect a build period of 2 years. So if you haven't started now, it's difficult to deliver in 2024. In terms of projections and where we're going, we think there's pressure on landlords. We think supply might well be curtailed and dropping off as people struggle to get development appraisal viability, and tenants will have to fight for the best quality space. So we expect rents to rise, and through to the period of 2026, we're expecting rents to rise in the region of 13–14% on the best quality space. On the grade B space, flatlining. Nothing really happening, a bit of growth as the tide rises, it pulls everything with it. Well, the real focus is on grade A prime space.
Although we are seeing uncertainty around costs, and we're certainly seeing increases in costs in the deals that we are doing, there is still a huge amount of capital to be deployed and invested in the market, which is great news for all of us involved in forward funding transactions. But what we have seen in our deals is that those costs are fixed at an early stage, and we are seeing deals that are falling over, but there are certainly a lot of deals still proceeding. So one of the important factors for occupiers in relation to space is sustainability. And who pays for that needs to be addressed early on in the discussions between the parties, and will depend on the commercial negotiating position of both parties and the nature of the space they're dealing with. Of course, landlords will be delivering space to a specification, and there will be tenants who will want to vary that specification to meet their needs, and by and large, tenants are willing to pay for the cost of those variations. But I think what is interesting to see is that there is this real increase in rent due to high premium office space, and that suggests a flight to quality which occupiers are willing to pay for.
We as occupiers have a key role to work with developers and funders to make developments work. Occupiers live in the real world and building costs are increasing. We can't hide behind that. But ultimately, we want to work as closely as we can with developers in an open book way. We understand everyone's got to make money, but so have we. So it's got to work for all aspects of the development pipeline, including main contractors. Nobody wants costs to be increasing, but they are. We think construction inflation in the hotel market is probably between 8 and 10% at the moment. Hopefully that's going to ease off in 12 months, 18 months time. But we've got to work with our developers to keep these projects going in the pipeline. And a lot of trying to save money comes down to value engineering and trying to deliver the product to the standards we want, but as efficiently as possible. Ultimately, if we can design a building to maximise the space used, deliver as many bedrooms for us as possible, things like inflation in building materials, which are a problem, we can overcome that by improving our returns. London is a key development area for us, and I think will be for certainly the next 10 years. We currently have about 17% of our estate in London, but it's probably our biggest area of opportunity too. There's lots of parts of London that we still need to get into. We've just bought a fairly major acquisition in the Strand, and that's going to be a 700-bed hub. So yeah, London is critical to us and should be for many years to come. So whether it's building out of the ground, whether it's converting an existing building, or whether it's a facade retention like Shoreditch where we are, or Snow Hill in London, or Moorgate, which are a couple of sites that we've got coming through in the pipeline that we've bought. All of them are great opportunities for us. We like to work with buildings and bring out the best in them to then turn them into great hotels. And actually, unique buildings are more attractive to our guests than things that are purpose-made.
We're starting to see a real alignment between the investor, occupier, and the local community. And we believe that this poses a real opportunity to deliver something really remarkable and exceptional at Canada Water and other sites like ours. It seems like the ESG, and in particular the S part of the ESG, the social aspect of it, is becoming a forefront of thinking for occupiers, investors, us as developers, and obviously the local community. As developers, I think we're starting to go away from the concept of creating a fortress of a building where you try and incorporate everything within the building, everything from reception, amenities, your restaurant, your gym, your roof terrace, your racetrack on the roof, everything goes inside a building. So we like to see this kind of fortress building deconstructed, where essentially we take benefit from other resources that are around us and we think about what's missing so we can add that into the mix.
It is absolutely vital for London construction to continue at a pace and to continue to attract investors and occupiers alike. It doesn't have to be through new development. I think what is going to be really important for the future construction in the city is the repurposing and restoring of old buildings, and that will play a really integral part. And that will actually go to the heart of decision making when it comes to sustainability and social value.
Thank you. Worth the wait, right? Worth the wait. Hopefully some food for thought there, and if you want to watch again, it will be available on all EG platforms. But now time for the live discussion. Title up there will give away a little bit of what we're going to be talking about. So the case for regeneration versus restoration. And I'm going to tweak it a little bit and steal from Ben Cross and a LinkedIn post of his, and start talking about how retrofit or restoration is the new vegan. But there is more to life than veganism. I quite like a steak, for example. So hopefully today's discussion is going to be around, it's never just one or the other. There's always something for everyone, I hope, which we heard a little bit about in that film. But while we get into that discussion, I'm going to ask each of my guests to introduce themselves and tell us, I guess, where they sit on that. Are they vegan or are they carnivores? Are they restoration or regeneration? And I'm going to start, of course, with Derek.
Thank you very much. I've got a certain requirement for my balanced diet. It's a balanced diet. My name's Derek Griffin. I head up the acquisitions team at Whitbread. We're responsible for delivering and growing the Premier Inn and Hub by Premier Inn brands across the United Kingdom. We have been on a long-term 30-year growth program, which has certainly included all types of vegetables and meats over the years. And so we'd like to think that we have had quite a bit of experience of new, old, bits borrowed, all the rest of it. So, you know, and I think we also are in quite a uniquely placed position as to where we sit, in that we also not only operate and keep some of our buildings, but we develop them and forward fund them, and so we get a bit taste of the whole menu.
Omnivore. Thank you. Kate?
Yes, hello everybody, my name is Kate Woods. I'm an associate at DP9 and we are planning consultants. We predominantly work in London, so this is a great topic, and it was really lovely to go and see the video of some of our work on there as well. I'm going to touch upon three parts from my point of view on this discussion. I suppose just thinking back to where we were pre-pandemic, thinking about the context, and you might have seen that there was a lot of local authorities in London saying, we are declaring a climate emergency. And I think that for me is kind of the starting point of this discussion, is that the seed was planted quite some time ago. And in that time, there has been a complete lack of strategic direction, I think, my personal opinion, from central government about how should we be developing buildings? What does the building of tomorrow look like? And what should government be doing in terms of strategic direction to help us deliver it? So I feel that at the moment we're in this complete vacuum of strategic direction, which brings me on to my second point, which is that in that vacuum, the private sector has come along and said, we're going to come across with all these standards, BREEAM, neighbours, ESG. I also put one down about 35% over Part L, which for me is kind of the big tick box when I'm putting together a planning application. And I think it's incredibly confusing. I'm going to put my hand up and say I don't quite understand what any of these things mean when we're talking about the regeneration versus restoration debate. They're acronyms for us. It's our language. It's how we speak in the industry. So this then brings me on to my third and final point, which I think is kind of part of the issue here, is communication. It's incredibly difficult to go and communicate these concepts to people out there in the real world, people outside of our sector, outside of our little bubble. Because I fundamentally believe that, you know, we should be making the case for restoration, regeneration across the whole of London. There are definitely buildings out there that should and be retained. But simultaneously, we should also be looking at, you know, fundamentally regenerating, you know, sites that need it. So I think on that note, I will pass on to Ali.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ali Abbas, and I'm the managing partner of Art Invest Real Estate. We are an investor developer, and we, in terms of the exam question of regeneration and restoration, we like and do both. So we've got around 100 properties across a range of markets, sectors, and risk types. So our markets are essentially the main gateway cities of Germany and also the UK. Since I set the business up 4 years ago, we've pretty much focused on London for the time being, so we're planning to expand it beyond that. Our sectors are very much offices, residential, hotels and data centres. We are long on green offices, so we're very much positive in terms of the thesis for offices. And in terms of risk type, we essentially buy opportunistic and core, so land and income and anything in between. So we've got a really good insight in terms of the opportunities and challenges of the pre-development, development, stabilisation journey. So I'm hoping to share some insights with you today. I mean, as Catherine said, it is complicated. There's a lot of issues there. But from what we've learned and our experience, I would say three things in terms of regeneration and restoration. You've got to bring everybody on the journey. And what I mean by that in terms of point one is really to triangulate both investors, occupiers and the community. And what we're seeing in terms of the re-rating of ESG is that has now become the principal investment criteria. So that alignment should be quite a bit more easier than it was in the past. I think the second thing really is innovation. I think you know, stand still and die is what I would say in terms of. I slightly disagree with Savills in terms of rents in the grey space will remain stable. I think they're going to come under downward pressure. I did an opinion piece for the EG, and I kind of, even though I've got an abundance of it, and there's quite a bit here, I go, grey is old, green is gold. And I talk about that more in terms of real estate. And the final thing really in terms of an insight is I think the ESG re-rating presents a huge opportunity. And I think, again, what I will agree with Savills on is obviously that there's just not enough space. So there's these extreme views of the shorting of the office sector. I ask myself, is the office sector going to go through the same as the shopping centre market, for example? And I think we're neither alarmist or naive, and I think the fundamentals are there. There is not enough green space, and there's quite a lot of demand from occupiers, and it's what the community wants. So again, expanding on that debate, we like a bit of both.
Another omnivore, like it. Chris.
Chris Cummings, I'm a director in Savills Earth. The Earth is an important distinction because it means that we are the energy and sustainability consultancy part of Savills. That means we do contain vegans. It's a great analogy because you don't need to go and pick under the surface to find out who your friends are that are vegan. You know which ones of your friends are vegan. They have told you about it. They make you very much aware of it, and the parallels with the carbon agenda are very, very strong in that regard. The Earth bit is also good because it means I get to agree with Ali on things where actually the rest of Savills can fight with you, so we should have some common ground today. The topic on the board, I think it's more about a question of what is responsible development, and that includes redevelopment, that includes retrofit, that includes refurbishment. I say everyone's being very loud and very noisy about vegans and being very noisy about carbon. That's because they have to be. It's new, it's nascent. The way you get to become part of the standard agenda is by making more noise than is really actually relevant. So you need to be a little bit militant, you need to protest, you need to fight your case on that, but sustainable development is about sustainably, environmentally, socially and economically. Now, if you push too hard on any one of those, or you make that leg of your stool too big in comparison to the detriment to the other two, the whole thing falls over. So it's really about taking a balanced approach to everything. Oh God, I'm going to do this. It's about a flexitarian diet that goes across all those options to make sure you end up with a good nutritional balance in what you end up putting on the table. We're going to keep this. I'm going to leave you to chew on that and hand over.
All the food analogies.
Sorry.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking, what food analogy can I work in?
I'm pretty hungry.
Yeah. I'm Will Seymour. I'm a partner in the real estate department at Shoesmiths. We're a full service law firm, and I work across a sort of broad range of real estate, working for investors, developers, and occupiers, with a particular focus on mixed use and residential redevelopment and regeneration. It's great to be here to discuss this today, because I think the sort of built environment and the changing face of that is something that interests not just our industry, but also pretty much everyone outside of it as well. It's one of those areas where everyone tends to have pretty strong opinions, and I think right at the moment we're at a really important sort of point in time in terms of the sort of pressures that questions around the built environment are facing. Significant social pressures and significant environmental pressures. So I think it's the right time to be having this sort of discussion. In terms of what I hope to sort of bring to that, as well as just sort of taking notes and reporting back. I think hopefully I'll bring a perspective in terms of what the sort of changing face of legislation and policy can do towards that, but also I think what its limits are. And I think also hopefully just bring a perspective in terms of the views of the variety of people in our industry, whether it's the developers, whether it's the investors, or whether it's the end users of property, because I think they all have a voice in this debate. In terms of where I stand, I think like everyone else, pretty much an omnivore. The city is kind of I know. The city is it's a great place because it's both one of the most forward-looking places in the world, but it's also steeped in history, and certainly from a social perspective, that's something that's very important to everyone within this place. So I think one always has to have an eye on reusing and redeveloping existing stock, but at the same time, sometimes innovation and new buildings require something. It's always going to be something that depends on a case-by-case basis. How about that for fence sitting?
One size does not fit all, one size fits one, yeah. I suppose. So let's start with that and this lack of strategic direction. And I wonder if there is no answer, really, there are 100 different answers to this question. How do we get strategic direction, and whose responsibility is it? Kate, I'm going to throw that back to you because it's one of your points.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I've had a very strong opinion about that. I think strategic direction, I think the world in which we operate in planning, we spend a lot of time thinking about, well, you know, creating like the best buildings, and we're going to benchmark it against different criteria. And I suppose the point that I was, you know, trying to put across earlier is that there's so many different ways of doing it, and it keeps changing, it'll keep evolving. And what we need is kind of, if it is that important on the agenda, if we're saying we are having a climate crisis, we really need to get, you know, government and, you know, with industry, with individuals, with people who are leading in this field to say, right, if you're going to be developing buildings in the future, this is what you need to be doing. You know, there's no kind of different standards being adopted. This is it. This is the framework. And, you know, as with legislation, you know, it adapts, it changes over time. It's not saying that it's static. And I don't think, you know, I'm sat here saying that it's just got to be one particular thing, but we need a framework in order to be able to go and deliver on kind of our net zero kind of agenda. You know, it's incredibly important that we do that.
And whose responsibility is that? Ali, is that your responsibility as an investor developer, or do you expect to be told what to do?
No, I think we can influence the debate. Obviously, clearly, policies are set by policymakers and the government. And I'll use an example such as at Canada Water, which is obviously the scheme that we own within the 5 acres within the wider British Land Master Plan at Canada Water. And when you're doing regeneration, for example, and where we are aligned on is that there's we're still working our way through, and it's uncertain. So I think you need to be flexible. And at Canada Water, there was a flexible program in terms of the planning and the framework. You're right, Catherine, there is a framework, but whilst this is an evolving piece and there are issues that we don't know, you have to incorporate a degree of flexibility in policy. Otherwise, you'll just go straight down a pathway and do Dieselgate. You know, we all thought that was the answer, and now look at the reversal from there. So I agree that there seems to be, you know, and what we want, certainly in terms of what does capital want, and it's really yearning for it at the moment, certainty, and it's not getting that from the broader policymakers. And then when you're looking to do good and regenerate and create outcomes, you need that certainty to do that. So I would just say, certainly in terms of the regeneration pieces, where master plans are typically 5, 7, 12 years, you can't be too set in your views when you don't even know what the outcomes are. So I'd say there's a bit of flexibility there. And I did, Canada Water, I noticed the tour that ALREF have organised is oversubscribed and in fact fully booked. So if there's anybody here who obviously wants a specific tour from one landowner, we're happy to kind of set that up separately. And obviously we're putting the red carpet down in front of BL because we own the front door of Canada Water. So I just thought I'd stick that in there once I had the opportunity. Sorry, well, we're always opportunistic, we're developers.
Derek, you straddle, I guess, the two sides of the coin. You know, you look at this as an occupier, you can look at it as a developer. Do you see any certainty there? Are you grasping for it, or can you inform that certainty?
Well, I think there's certainly a lack of strategic central government advice as to what we should be doing. So, you know, in response to that, you know, the private sector and the various stakeholders in it are kind of making their own way. Now, obviously, a byproduct of that is undoubtedly there's lots of anachronism, can't say the word. You know, there's lots of things that we're meant to be looking to do, and everybody is slightly different. So it is uncertain. But I think that, you know, the real agenda is being driven, you know, in the Whitbread perspective by our stakeholders. So, you know, we have requirements from our shareholders who are expecting us to be forward-looking and meeting Whitbread's commitments and contributing towards the green agenda, but at the same time obviously wanting a return on their investment, which is fair enough. You know, we have the operational business, which is trying to fulfill the things that are set out by the company, but at the same time trying to run a profitable business. And then obviously we don't just use our own money to do that. Obviously we use the shareholders' money, but obviously when we are developing our sites, Some of them, not all of them, but some of them we look to forward fund. So we have long-term relationships with pension funds and certain people that hold Whitbread as a long-term asset, which is very important. And obviously they are setting their own agendas, and there are requirements that, we're probably more aware of things like our lease terms and other bits and pieces where we're doing a lease. We recently forward funding our hotel at Marylebone for a hub there, and it was a key part of that was understanding with the investor how we would adjust our lease to make sure that we at least move towards some of their requirements, but at the same time balancing the fact that we're going to be there for 25 years and at least trying to run a business, profitable business. So there are lots of different stakeholders who are probably driving the thing more progressively than a central government at the moment. Now, in the long term, I suspect that we hope that isn't sustainable. We'd hope that you'd be a bit more focused and strategic, and that will help us be more efficient in what we're trying to do, but we're just trying to do the best we can.
Yeah. Chris, you talked about collaboration, and I wonder if the vegans of this world, the carbonistas, if that is a word, of this world, who are loud stakeholders, are maybe driving too much of the agenda, or are they shouting too loudly towards restoration when actually regeneration might be the better, more sustainable route?
I don't think they're shouting too loudly, because I think, as I say, it's a necessary part of the process to have that protest piece. By them shouting so loudly, what it's doing is it's stretching the canvas that we all can actually write on. So it's dragging it much further over into the embodied carbon debate than it would be if they didn't make all that noise. What has got to be recognised by the people that actually write on that and create the policies and the ways of delivering things in the space that happens in between those points that are pulling against each other is that it's not the be-all and end-all. If they're saying retrofit only, I mean, that's too hardline an outlook. But retrofit first makes absolute sense. So when we come back to things that government can do, what local authorities can do in planning, by putting in place robust hierarchies for decision making, that you say, yes, you absolutely can knock that down and start again if you've shown me this, if you've then shown me this after that, and if you show me that after that, and that all those measures are the environmental, the social, the economic, the quality of the space, the well-being of the people that interact with it, what it does to the community if you change that use or you do something with it. All those hoops have to be put in a nice kind of rigid hierarchy, and you think of the cooling hierarchy and things. GLA doesn't ban you putting cooling in an apartment in London, but it makes you go through a hierarchy to get there. Very simple steps to do. They just need to put those pieces in place so that actually it comes to a considered point. But in terms of the vegans being loud, I mean, I'm an environmentalist of 25 years. I'm a card-carrying bunny, hugger. I'm right out there with them doing that. But that's because I know we need to do it. It'll settle down. It will build into more policy. It will build into building regs, and that corner will quieten down because it will have been absorbed into the system. But it's a necessary noise at the moment.
You should try hugging trees. They're not as fast as bunnies.
They're not as cuddly. Or as tasty.
Will, there's putting more policy or hoops in place. It's a lawyer's dream, isn't it? Is that a way to, should there be certain standards that every development, every regeneration, every restoration needs to go through, or is that just going to slow things down when, as Ali said and as we heard on the video, we need more space, we need more green space? Does this not just slow things down?
Yeah, it's difficult. There's a sort of balance to be struck. But in a way, in terms of sort of policy and legislation, there are blunt tools that you can use to encourage particular behaviours. And I think the most obvious blunt tool that's been used over the last sort of decade or so is EPCs and the legislation around that, and the fact that's been, the rules around those are now sort of tightening. When that sort of originally came into play, they were sort of vague, they weren't particularly relevant. Whereas now, you look at the sort of impact that those are having on building stock, and the fact that buildings are rapidly sort of approaching the sort of obsolete level, you realise that kind of tool is quite effective. But it's a very blunt one, and it's not really the sort of thing that's going to guide great change and really sort of change the direction of what people do in terms of planning and development. But I don't think lawmaking and government can do that. That has to come from the people within the market. That has to be driven by occupiers and their requirements, has to be driven by investors and what their shareholders expect to see in terms of responsibility. But what they need in order to operate properly is a proper legislative framework. And I think that it's that bit at the moment where there's detail lacking. You can't be, from a legal perspective, you can't be prescriptive about how people build, but you can set out so I think that's what Chris, you suggested, the steps and the rule book that you've got to go through. And if everyone knows what that is, then people can plan, and they can plan for the short term, and they can plan for the long term. But I think that sort of uncertainty that there is at the moment is what causes some of the issues.
Thank you. Kate?
No, I mean, I don't have much more to go and add to that. I think what this kind of all comes down to is that people really want certainty. You know, developers want certainty. Our industry wants certainty about what are we delivering? Like, what kind of placemaking, what kind of London do we want to live in? And it's really important that we have this conversation now so that we can build in that certainty into the planning process.
Thank you. Ali, how do you communicate with those communities to understand what they want? You know, a big part of whether it's regeneration, restoration, is what the people need, what the occupier needs, what the place needs.
Yeah. Well, we just are transparent. We're authentic as a private business, and how we operate. I put all my principals and development leads at the front end, where they literally are engaging with key stakeholders, and then there's no break of the chain where there would typically be the community engagement, sustainability. It would literally be the guy or girl who's delivering is following through, and that was an instrument to that was an operational piece that was key to our success. And obviously there's probably a few consultants in there, and obviously Catherine's one of them who were instrumental in enabling us to achieve one of London's largest planning applications during the pandemic. For a fairly complicated site, and obviously not least with the great support of Southwark. And we were quite blessed with the fact that the community were really supportive, and that was because we just got involved with the community. We committed to delivering things and just really tried to deliver, because I think that there's a point around you can end up being too ideological. And if you do that, then you're not going to deliver. And what is the purpose of what we are seeking to do, which is to deliver the collective outcomes, to try and do good, and that will be a range of what ESG is. And I think that's really how we approach things, in terms of just trying to maintain trust and deliver and acting on that. But the key for me was really the authenticity and our connection with the community through a single point of engagement, rather than a break in the chain, where sometimes you can get a bit of a loss of trust. And
Derek, to your point about you still got to make some money out of this. So the talking to the community, asking what they want, has got to balance with what a business needs to make money. And how does this argument sit within that?
Well, it depends where you are. These conversations, obviously, with the benefit of having a large portfolio across the country and lots of different projects, you get to meet lots of different people, lots of different communities, lots of different priorities. So that's quite interesting. I think one of the benefits, of Whitbread have had is this a long-term development pipeline, which has meant we can get some kind of stability in terms of the consultant groups that we put together and the people internally, so that they can kind of develop this level of expertise and knowledge and understanding of what's likely to come through, both in terms of the comms, but also what the community might want out of something, what the social benefits or otherwise are of our hotels. We've done a lot of work to try and understand the full picture, because obviously you can go into certain locations and try and do something and you're on the back foot immediately. So you've got to prepare, and I think we're fortunate in that we've got those long-term relationships. We're not starting from scratch on each project. We're building up a wealth of experience, and that clearly, obviously, mean, there is the rest of the country as well, but it's accentuated in London. Some of those, the London boroughs, central London boroughs, you know, you are constantly trying to build those relationships to try and respond to what the people want and how their representatives see that, which is equally important. So, you know, it's about long-term stability on our side to maximise our output, I think.
Thank you. I'm glad you've mentioned what people want and the word social benefit, because I think when we think about buildings, actually this conversation isn't about the bricks and mortar, is it? It's about what the buildings mean, and some, as we talked about, some need to be knocked down because we don't want to see them anymore and they have no heart to them, but other buildings need to be retained because they are the heart of somewhere. And Chris, I know when we've talked before, we've talked about the community pub, and for you, how important is that social use of the building in this argument, for want of a better word, between should we knock it down or should we retain it?
Well, I think when all the vegans that are shouting about embodied carbon have quietened down, the next noisiest part will be the social, because it's always been bubbling away as a big piece. I think things like, you know, MEES is a great driver, but if you start to lose pieces of your high street and your community because of their EPC rating, then something's gone very, very wrong indeed. So actually how you start to recognise existing buildings, you know, if you've got heritage high streets where they're part of the community that are going to be difficult to decarbonise, but they're in densely populated locations where you've got excellent transport links, you're reducing the carbon from that, you've got a great carbon story about embodied carbon with them being retained. You're not going to be able to get those to the same energy performance in terms of efficiency as you can with a new build. You can decarbonise it by switching to electricity and helping to enable the grid, but you're always going to have to give them some kind of exception and some way of preserving those, rather than just having, yeah, there's not going to be a childcare centre here anymore and the bingo hall's gone and the job centre's gone because they all had EPCs of a D and they've ripped out the community. And so we put them out in this kind of brownfield site that we've developed on the edge of town. You all have to travel out there for it now because that's got an EPC of an A. We need to be mindful of that, and what that metric looks like and how that comes to the fore, I don't know yet, but it's definitely going to have to come, because otherwise if we, you know, all these years as an environmentalist, if we just keep focusing on what I do, it's going to rip it out. You don't want to be just driving to energy efficiency because you'll let that social economic piece tumble away again. So it's going to have to come as recognised. But yeah, that'll be the next big militant crowd that are stretching the conversation over there. The new vegans.
The new vegans. We have, amazingly, only 2.5 minutes left, and I don't want to hog all of the questions. I can, of course, but if there are any out there, please do raise a hand. There's a gentleman right here, just here in the...
I'm not sure if I missed it, but have you talked about character and collage and the idea of old and new, working with something that's existing being more interesting, more enlivening? Minestrone soup flavour, etc.
Well, I think that we have quite a few examples where we've tried to develop our projects in quite interesting ways. The one site that was mentioned in the video is the Snow Hill Police Station, which is interesting because obviously the listed bit at the front has a lot of character, a lot of flavour, but actually in modern terms really is not very efficient to use. I don't know what its EPC rating is, I suspect shocking. But we're adapting some of that, retaining it, but at the back where all the prison cells were, which were, you know, some people really liked, but ultimately they're no use to us as a hotel. So will all be brand new at the back with a glazed atrium. So it's trying to use that. It will be a fascinating entrance to that and give character to that branded budget hotel, but it will give it some kind of flavour and feeling, which is different. So, you know, that's not unique. You quite often have to, you know, we did the General Lying In Hospital many years ago, which I know won a boo-boo prize for architecture, the modern bit, but we were only the tenant on that one.
Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that is one area you've highlighted there, that planning really does play a major important part, because about ensuring that mix and that tapestry there are weaved together is where it needs to go to a bigger piece, and that's what the local authorities should be doing, and that's where planning plays a really important part in town planning, to make sure you've got a mixed grill with salad actually presented, rather than someone's just ripped the whole cart out and gone for quinoa everywhere. So I think that's where that bigger piece comes back into.
We have 30 seconds. One more question if anyone has one. Right here. Can we get a mic to the middle of the stairs? Thank you very much.
I just wanted to ask, at feasibility stage, what kind of factors would influence your decision, rather if you had a site, if you would regenerate it or restore it?
Ali?
I think it's really what is on the site, and what is the best outcome for you know, the development. And I think it's really the question around these two polarised positions of you know, a green car versus a diesel car and hybrids work. And so it really is, you know, what is there and what are you doing to contribute and actually, because I look at it as a building is a skeleton, and then really it's in, you know, its permeability with the community is really the heart, the lungs, the blood, and everything else. So I think it's really, you've got to judge each scheme by its own merit and its own fundamentals and do the right thing. So, as I said, we do both, but we do the stuff in the middle. We're timed out as well.
Yeah, I timed out. I always go over, it's all right. I'll get told off, I can take it. I think we started there with food and we finished with biology, and actually we're talking about buildings, which is great, which is just a real showcase of there is so much in this industry and so many different parts, and it's a real menu that we need to be able to provide, not just one or the other. This conversation could go on forever, and I'm sure it will. Please do keep talking about our wonderful built environment and the different solutions there are for bringing buildings and places to life. This was just a little part of that. But please join me in thanking our wonderful panel, Derek, Kate, Ali, Chris and Wayne.